Hello, friends, and welcome back to Liam Teaches Chess. Continuing my series where I review my tournament games on my goal to reach 2000 USCF rating. Today I'm reviewing a Swiss I played, a Swiss tournament where you play random people at the St. Petersburg Chess Club in Florida. Round one here. I'm playing with the black pieces against Oxford. I do have several tournaments on the backlog I need to record, hoping to get to them all today. So goal of mine is to start just doing these videos the day after I play the tournament, so everything's fresh in my head. But we'll do our best here. It's the holidays. You know what? Like and subscribe. Appreciate each of you guys for watching. Playing against Oxford, he's around 1100. I believe he's like a high school freshman. Plays e4. I play c5. He plays knight c3. I respond knight c6, knight f3, d6, bishop c4, e6, blunting the scope of the bishop, pointing at my f7 pawn. Both of us are developing pieces and controlling the center squares. d4, I take, he goes with the knight. I respond with knight f6. He plays bishop g5, pinning my knight to my queen. I play bishop e7, breaking the pin. He castles. And I think for a while here where, I'm playing a player who I'm around 18 to 1900. He's around 1100. So it's pretty reasonable. We're playing game 40, both sides of the game 40. I could simply castle here, and just say, hey, let's play a game. I'm pretty sure I'll play him in a even game. But I had my eyes on this tactic, knight takes e4, with the idea being knight takes e4, bishop takes e7. I grabbed a pawn, knight takes c3. He takes my queen. I take his queen. Maybe he takes my knight. I take his bishop. All is equal there, but I got a pawn. Or knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes g5, knight takes, queen takes. Thought I won a pawn there as well. Or knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, queen. Bishop c7, hitting my d pawn. Knight takes b2, hitting his bishop. Bishop b3, and then d5, giving my knight this c4 square to retreat to. So as you can see, I'm kind of going deep down the line here. I also looked at knight takes e4 and him capturing on c6 at points. And, I thought for a while and I simply went for it, which you can see the chess.com engine is giving it a mistake. My challenge to you would be to find the best continuation for white here. Pause the video if you need time. I'm going to just go forward. Why this is a mistake is white could have responded with knight takes e4, bishop takes g5 by me, right? Got to get back a piece. Knight takes c6, hitting my queen. I take back. The knight takes my bishop on g5. My queen takes his knight on g5. And white queen takes on d6. And yes, we are tied in pawns, 6 versus 6. But white is better here because this white queen is preventing me from castling. My c pawn is weak. It's an isolated pawn that has no defenders. Like queen e7, trying to trade queens, fails to a move like queen takes c6, losing the rook. So I think like black has to play something like bishop b7 here. And, it just seems worrisome. Like rook d1, threatening queen d7 is on the table. It all seems bad. My opponent, he's 1100. We played a couple times. I've won all the games. And when I did knight takes e4, I think he simply believed me, right? If you go back to one of the past videos, I had done a similar tactic to him winning the pawn with the central fork trick. And, like when you're playing someone stronger than you, don't always just believe them. I can blunder tactically. Players better than you can blunder tactically. Ding Liren in the World Chess Championship blunder tactically. By the way, there's also ideas of knight takes e4, bishop takes, or bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes, e5, forking the pieces. But that loses to a move like bishop b5, where if you take the knight, this occurs. That was the other part of the plan. But so what actually happened in the game is I take on e4, he takes on e7, I take on c3, he takes on d8, I take on d1, and then he takes with the rook, and I take the bishop with my knight, and then he plays knight b5, and I realized that, oh, I didn't really see this knight b5 move, and there's no real ways to both defend my weak pawn, which is being attacked twice, and stop knight c7, which would fork my king and rook, right? Something like king d7 is a check, right? Where I was simply something like this occurs. I did think about something like um, playing d5, knight c7, king, or let me remember what I was thinking at. Yeah, I think I looked at stuff like d5, knight c7, king e7, knight takes the rook, and then something like bishop d7, knight tries to get out, and a6, and just saying that I'm trying to trap the knight here. But I don't think I actually trapped the knight. I don't think that's the exact line I was looking at either. And so I simply castled here and accepted that this wasn't really what I was going for, right? Like, I'm not trying to just trade into an end game where white is better here because all my pieces are on the back rank, right? These pieces are developed. And, like he could take my bishop. It's not easy for me to get my pieces in the game. So, I'm pretty confident I can win an endgame against a player 700 points lower rated than me. And endgames is like a relative strength of mine. But this really wasn't the goal of the opening. So I play a6 and he plays rook d3. Not a good move to me because you're taking this diagonal from your bishop, right? If your goal is to double the rooks, something like rook d2 seems better. Plays rook d3. And like if I'm him, like I'm considering just grabbing the bishop and just saying, fine, let's play an endgame. I have a bishop. I have a 3-on-2 pawn majority on the queen side, which is often seen as an advantage for the person who has the majority because both kings are on the king side. So our kings are a little bit further from this side of the board if you can get a pass pawn. So that's what I would have probably done. But he does rook d3. I do b5, bishop b3, and then I play bishop d7, which, like I can't play bishop d7 here because he takes on b7 and he threatens my bishop. If I take back, he wins a pawn like this. I have 5 and he has 6, right? So that's why I had to do this b5 maneuver. And now I do b7. And if he tries to grab this pawn, well, that doesn't work because I just can take the knight with my rook and defend my bishop. So he plays bishop b3. I play bishop d7. I don't want to let him win my bishop. He plays rook d1. I play bishop c6, getting out of this nastiness. He plays c4, which I think is kind of a mistake. It's blunting the scope of your bishop, and I simply play b4, which the engine says is a mistake, but taking doesn't seem good to me, allowing his pieces to get access to new squares, improving the scope of the bishop. So engine says b4 is a mistake, but in my opinion, it's pretty good because practically at least, this bishop is garbage right now. I'm going to play stuff like a5, maybe a4, and this pawn has no pawns that can defend it. So this pawn is either going to be a strength in queen or it's going to be a weakness and I'm going to be able to win it. He plays c5, which, okay, now his bishop sees the board. He has the c4 square, but now this pawn could be quite weak, right? I play knight b7, kind of have to. I don't really have many other moves. He takes, I take, and he plays rook c1, which I thought was a mistake. I thought better was rook d7, in which case I play bishop c6, and if he plays rook c7, trying to chase my bishop and double on my 7th rank, then I can play something like rook f c8, and I can simply force the trade. And now your rook can't get in. I can play moves like g6 to give my king some scope, and then I can play moves like a5, maybe a4. And my goal is going to be to try to win this c pawn, which is essentially an isolated pawn with my pawn on b4, stopping these pawns moving. But he doesn't go for what I thought was the most trying line. He plays rook c1, and I play bishop c6, blockading the passed pawn for now. He plays rook d6, and I play rook c8, defending the bishop. He plays bishop d1, and I play king f8 with the idea to play king e7, try to get my king in the game. And here he takes on c6. I thought maybe his best line was something like bishop f3, where I take. So yeah, now he has double pawns. But the point is, maybe he's queening by force with stuff like this. I don't think it works, but that's something I was a little bit worried about. He does rook takes c6. I take back. He plays bishop f3, rook takes c8. And to be honest with you, I didn't see any of this. But I don't think this is good for him, right? Like, and this is a reminder to you guys out there where it's like sometimes you see a tactic, right? And I told him after the game, like, look, you found a tactic, but I don't think this is a good tactic for you. I think this position is just better for me. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I was just so excited that like I saw I could do this. And I was like, I get that, but you have to assess whether this position is good for you. And after takes, why I think this is not so great for him is, I'm going to do stuff like king e7, e5, king e6, king d5, and just try to win this pawn. And, this pawn can't come to b4 to make the c pawn supported. So, and white's king is further away from this pawn. This pawn is maybe a little overextended. So king f1, king e7, king e2, e5, king e3, king e6, rook c4. Also not a good move in my mind, where it's like, I don't really get the purpose of this move. Maybe king e4 was better, but then I play f5, so hard to say. I simply play a5, of course, defending my pawn. And then he plays f4, where, I mean, maybe white should be doing stuff like a3, trying to, weaken these pawns. But after f4, what I do is I simply play king d5, activating my king, attacking the rook. He plays rook e4. I take on f4 with check, which the engine says is a mistake. He takes with the rook, and I play pawn f6. And, but the point is, if I take the c pawn, I lose the f pawn. Same thing, right? So that's why I played f6. And I was looking at moves like rook g4, trying to be annoying, where either I play g6 or rook c7, probably g6, rook h4, h5, and finally I'm winning the pawn with something like this, either with my king or rook. But I play f6, white checks me, I play king c4, and he blunders with rook f4. And so pause the video here and find the best continuation for white. I am going to continue where I saw that white could play b3, but I thought this was good for me for a couple reasons. Either I thought I could play king b5, but no, you can't, because king d4, and apparently, the white king is just too active, and I guess rook e6 and rook e2 just doesn't work. Like, this is a draw continue the engine. But the other thing I thought b3 maybe gave me is going to like king c3. And the point is I'm going to try to come get these pawns, but I don't really know why it wants the, rook f2 doesn't seem to work to me because I take on c5, right? So let's see. It says if king c3, I guess I'm losing because king e4, exclam. And the point, I guess, is that the king is getting to d5 and getting in the game. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I guess I just missed that the white king could get active. the rook is a terrible blockader of the passed pawn, right? It doesn't see the board, just sees the pawn. And stuff like king d5, king d6, push the pawn, king d7, and I am lost if I go for that. So a little bit fortunate that he played rook f4. I take the c pawn, and now it's a, it's not an easy win, but it's an easier win. Now he plays b3, and king d6 is played by me with the idea of trying to get over here. He plays rook d4, king e6, and then rook c4 is simply not understanding some endgame principles, which I will tell you now, which is when you're down a pawn, endgames that are good for you are rook endgames. A lot of those endgames can be drawn with a rook, where you just simply get your pieces active, you try to get behind the passed pawns, and you are fine. Endgames that are almost always losing, though, are king and pawn endgames where you're down a pawn and you have more weaknesses because, you simply put white in zugzwang, making them waste tempo, and then you can queen your extra pawn and turn into a queen and win the game. And so it's essentially what happened here. King d6, king d4, g6, me wasting a tempo here. c5, you want to keep your tempos in reserve, by the way. You don't want to like move 2 squares unnecessarily. King c6, king c4. Again, I'm just wasting tempo. f5. But the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to play stuff like g5, f4, g4, f3, and make the king come get this pawn, and then I can come get this pawn. So white has issues because these pawns are a problem. This pawn's a problem. White is lost. So a3 is what he decided to do. I took. King b3 is forced. King takes c5. King takes. And yeah, I could waste, I could try to like push this pawn up the board, but you don't want to, right? You simply play moves like king d4. You make white waste time going to get that pawn because if you come this way, this pawn starts going this way. It's like a goalie in soccer, right? You can't guard one corner of the board of your goal and the other corner at the same time. So this pawn is just like an anchor over the neck of the white king. King a4, king e3, takes the pawn, king f2, king b2, takes the pawn, king c3. I took the other pawn too, not necessary, but king g2. And then he resigned here because I am just going to queen, where I am guarding what we call the touchdown square or the queening square. So started round 1 with a win. In round 2, I am playing Lubo, who we've played a lot of games against, and I'm playing with the white pieces. c4, c6, g3, d5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop g2, g6, castles, bishop g7. You may be wondering, why doesn't black take this pawn? And the point is that it's often like you're spending a turn to do this. You don't get to take a pawn and develop your pieces. So taking a pawn, not considered best. It is a move, right? And white can always win the pawn with stuff like queen c2, a4, knight e5. These are all ideas to win the pawn. This is kind of like the Catalan is what we're playing here. Bishop g7, d4, castles, queen c2. And I saw this move bishop f5, but at the time, this was after, I don't know, game 4 or 5 of the World Chess Championship. And I was watching a recap of one of the games, or I was watching one of the games live. I don't remember. And I think queen c2 is a move I think Gukesh played where, or maybe it was Ding, but I think it was Gukesh, where the whole idea is you want black to play bishop f5 so that you can play queen b3 and put pressure on the b7 pawn with the bishop is no longer defending and the d5 pawn. And so it wasn't from this exact position. I don't think it's as good, but that's what we had. Queen c8 defends the pawn and perhaps has the idea of bishop h3, knight c3 by me, knight a6. And knight a6, to be honest with you, is not a move I understood at all because I was like, okay, the knight can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. And this d5 pawn I'm attacking once, twice, 3 times, and you're only defending it twice. So I would say this was pretty, and by the way, I'm like pretty up on time. My opponents used some time here, probably like 8 minutes or so. And I think this was just pretty poor by me to not even consider what the point of knight a6 was, which is, I took the pawn, which is a mistake. He takes back, also, I guess, a mistake. I took with the knight, which you can see the engine thinks is a blunder, takes back, and queen takes. And I was like, cool, I won a pawn. This is easy. I'm crushing Lubo, who's like a 2100. And then knight b4 hit, and I realized, ooh, I have issues here where knight c2 is an idea. You're attacking my queen. My d pawn can be weak, right? So what I should have done is, I simply develop normally a move like bishop f4 and get my rooks connected. And then you ask this knight, like, what are you doing here? And the knight, can go back to c7. And all it's doing is a defensive task. It's not that good. White's position is pretty nice. You can put your rook on c1. You can put your rook on e1 or d1. You have more space. So this would have been a pretty nice position, a pretty big win out of the opening for me. And just really bad that I didn't even consider what is the point of knight a6. I thought it was just knight c7. I didn't think about knight b4. So the game went takes, knight b4. And here, I think I thought for like 15 minutes. The moves I thought about are queen b5, queen b3, queen a5. I also thought about queen c5, offering a trade of queens. I eventually settled on the best engine move, which is queen b3. Knight c2 hits the board, attacking my rook. Rook b1, which the problem is that this bishop is now lined up with the rook. Knight takes d4, takes. And I did think about doing something like here I did bishop takes b7. But I thought about doing something like, let me remember. Bishop e3, where I attack the bishop. The bishop has no retreating squares that are safe because my knight attacks here. And so we could get something like takes, bishop f5. And yes, I'm down the exchange here. But I think this is not too difficult a hold for white. I mean, yes, I can always take here as well, but this seems pretty nice for white because, you can put your bishop on c3 where it's really solid. Black's rooks are not really in the game yet. And so down the exchange here, but these, I have the bishop pair. So this was one line I thought about. But I did go for bishop takes b7, which I think is the top engine move. And he took on a2, not a move I saw. And then I thought for a long time here because I didn't see the best move for white. Like, it took me way too long to see. So I would pause your clock and find out what would you play if you were white here. I thought about taking the queen. I thought about queen b5. I thought about queen b4. All right, I have to defend this bishop, I thought about taking this bishop. Queen b5, I thought the issue was a6, hitting my queen, right? And I can't defend this knight as well. And so I eventually settled on queen f3, and white is totally fine here because I attacked the queen, I attacked the rook. So Lubo played queen takes c5. I took the rook. He took my knight, and the dust is settled here. And I'm a little bit worse, but we have even pawns, even bishops, even rooks. And so I didn't think I was that bad here. And my original intention, I think it's bishop d4, was to play e3. Just, blunting the bishop. Or no, sorry. My original intention was like bishop e4, getting my bishop to safety just to not deal with any, issues with losing my bishop, which I think this is the top engine move. I probably should have played it. But I first played bishop h6, rook d8, and I thought I was going to play rook c1. I develop with tempo. I play rook c1. But the issue is rook c1 can deal with bishop takes f2 check, where the point is if I take, take, I lose a pawn. And maybe this is holdable. It's opposite colored bishops. It's down one pawn. It's a rook. My pawn structure is a little bit worse, but this, I mean, this is probably pretty drawish. So maybe I should have gone for this, right? Like the engine evaluates this as, yeah, draw is what they say. Opposite colored bishops usually are a draw, is a general rule of thumb. I have a dark squared bishop. He has a light squared bishop. And so that probably would have been fine for me, but um, I instead played b3 because this pawn is loose right now. Top engine move is b4 for reasons unknown to me, but played b3 and he took it. And yeah, I have the same issue, right? Where this bishop is hanging. So if I take here, takes. And again, that's maybe okay. It's not opposite colored bishops. And I did take, he took, and then I played e3, bishop f6. And the engine still thinks this is effectively a draw, but it's not easy. I played rook b1, queen c7, h4, because I was worried about moves like g5 trapping in my bishop. So I play h4, a5, queen d5, and the engine wants me to play like queen a4 here and just blockade the pawn, try to win it probably. But I play queen d5, queen d8, and queen b5, which is a mistake because it wants me to play rook b7, I believe, and then takes, takes. The point is I get behind the pass pawn. Rooks want to be behind the pass pawn. And it's hard for black to win this, even though they're up an extra pawn. And so I play queen b5, bishop e5, king g2, queen b8, and then queen d3, which is a blunder. I didn't even consider the best move here, which is queen a4 exclam. Sorry for not asking you to pause your video. Forgot to do that. But the point is, yes, our rook is hanging, not with check though. And so if you take our rook, you have left the back rank and you are getting checkmated. And so queen a4 would have been nice. I thought I just had to defend the pawn, and I thought this endgame is just losing because same colored bishops down a pawn generally is lost. The engine, yeah, says minus 3.4 here. And so that is why I played queen d3, not considering all my resources. Takes b1, takes b1, bishop g7, and I have to trade here, right? Bishop f, I don't want to trade, but e5, bishop g5, f6, and my bishop is trapped. And so I have to trade, and now I'm just losing. Maybe maybe Magnus Carlsen could draw this endgame, but the issue for me is that, yes, I win this pawn, but I'm not in time to get back and stop this pawn. I resigned earlier than this, but I'm just showing you how the game could have gone. So this game was pretty wacky, right? I had a great opening, then I spoiled it, and then there was just like some crazy tactics all over the board. But eventually I lost. So, I thought I played part of it well, but no, I just rushed in the opening. So I'm 1-1 on the day. And that brings us to game 3, where I am again playing with the black pieces. This game is against Tanisha. She is, I think, 11 or 10 years old. She's a girl, and she is, I think she's around like 1600. So she's one of the top 100 rated girls in the country. And so this is our first time playing. She played e4. I played c5, the Sicilian. She played c3. This is the Alpine Sicilian. And against the Alpine, usually you play d5, which Scandinavian players will notice it's very similar, right? You're playing d5, and the Scandinavian is an opening I used to play. So I quite like playing that against the Alpine. She took. I took with the queen. Knight f3. I played knight f6. And here she played d4. I've noticed that like online in blitz games, some strong players play this move knight a4. The point being, you have stuff like bishop c4 developing with tempo, and your knight can get to b5 as well, threatening c7. So she played d4. I played e6, blunting in my bishop, but if you just go ahead and play bishop f5, sometimes you get too tender over here, and this pawn gets weak. So that's why I played e6, remaining solid. Bishop e2, knight c6, bishop e3. And against bishop e3, you pretty much have to relieve the tension and capture, right? Like if I instead play something like bishop e7, well then oftentimes this move c4 can hit the board and things can get annoying with stuff like d5. And so that is why I took the d pawn. She took back with the pawn. And now I'm playing against an isolated pawn. An isolated pawn is pawns that don't have defenders on either side of it. And a general rule of thumb when you're playing against isolated pawns is you want to blockade the square in front of the pawn and then eventually build up pressure and win it. Also, trades are bad for the side that has the isolated pawn because you need pieces to protect your pawn since you don't have pawns to protect the pawn. When you have the isolated pawn, you need to play dynamically, which means attacking chess, right? You need to find a ways to attack, get an attack going. And so it can be hard. And so here I played bishop b4 check, and she played knight d2. Against knight c3, I was debating moves like queen a5, building up pressure. I was debating on a move like knight e4, taking advantage of the pinned knight. And she played knight d2. And like she's playing a stronger player, and I think she just wants to play solid, right? And this can be a mistake where you're playing someone better than you and you just play too passive, right? And I think that is the theme of this game for her. Here I castled and she castled, and I played a6, which you can see the engine thinks is a mistake, but controlling this b5 square is important a lot of the time. And yeah, I don't really remember exactly what I was thinking. Maybe I was going to play b5. She played knight b3 with clear intentions to get to the c5 square. And so here I did something called prophylaxis, which is the idea of thinking about what your opponent wants to do and stopping it. And so that is why I played the move b6, right? I am controlling the c5 square, and my bishop can now develop to b7. So oftentimes in Sicilians, you get a pawn structure like this on your queen side. And here she played knight e1, which again, I think is too passive. I was looking at stuff like knight e5, where, takes is what I was thinking about. And I don't know if I can grab this pawn. Maybe my queen can get trapped at times. Something like bishop d4 here. I don't think I can grab that pawn. And so I thought knight e5 was better, more active. She played knight e1. Similar idea, just a little bit more passive. I played bishop b7. She plays bishop f3. So this is the idea of knight e1, to allow the bishop to get to f3 and hit the queen. And here I was deciding between d7 and d8. And think about which one you would decide. Pause your clock if you wish. I decided on d8. And the reason is I would like to play queen d7, where I defend the bishop and my rooks stay connected. However, I thought white here could play d5, with the point being that, if I take with the knight, the bishop can take me. Maybe I take with the queen or the pawn. It doesn't matter. We'll say the pawn here. And then white can take on b6. And yes, I do have the bishop pair, so that's good for me. But now I'm the one with the isolated pawn, and white got rid of their isolated pawn. What I didn't think about is after d5, maybe white can, or black can play knight e5. I thought about that after reviewing the game. See, the engine thinks this is a little bit better for me. You can't really take on e6, but then I take on f3 with check. So yeah, this probably would have been fine for me, but that's why I decided queen d8, because now if d5, I defend the b pawn, and so this is just giving away a free pawn. So queen d8, knight c2. Again, this knight is not very good. It attacks my bishop, and that's really it. So I drop the bishop back to e7. Can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. When you're like struggling with what to do in chess, think about your pieces and think about what they're doing, if they're good at all. This knight too, can't go here, can't go here, is only defending here. Like, her pieces are just not very good. This is her best piece. It's active. It sees the board, right? This piece, and this is why it's confusing. You may think this piece is bad. It's only staring at the knight. But if that knight moves, it sees the whole chessboard. So this piece is actually pretty great. She plays rook c1, and I play knight d5. Again, against passed pawns, we want to blockade against the passed pawn with the knight here. She plays rook e1. Again, I think she's struggling what to do. So she's moving the rook here. I play rook c8, developing my rook, getting on the open c file. She plays queen e2. I play rook c7, perhaps planning to play queen c8, perhaps planning to play queen a8, kind of like a bow and arrow type structure. She plays knight d2. Oh, spoilers, spoilers. Sorry, guys. She plays knight d2. Again, don't really like. I guess she's trying to get to the c4 square now. And here I finally took the bishop. I could have taken the bishop earlier, but I figured let's at least get the bishop pair. Yes, she no longer has an isolated pawn, but she does have 1, 2, 3 pawn islands. So general rule of thumb is less pawn islands are good because they're easier to defend. So I have 2 and she has 3. And this pawn's pretty weak. Here I play queen c8, setting up a trap, which, pause the video if you wish to see, like if white just plays a3, the point is here black can unveil perhaps knight takes d4, exclamation. You can't take the bishop because you lose your queen. If you take the knight, well, then you lose your rook. Maybe I would take the bishop first, hitting the queen, but you lose your rook. Yeah, and if you take the bishop, I take with check. And if you take here, I take with check and then take. So that would lose the exchange. If you take with the pawn, first I take, the queen takes, and then I take here. So I would have won a pawn like that. So that is the trap in the position. And I play queen c8, and she plays knight b3. So she moved her knight, and now she moved it back, right? Like she's struggling for moves here. I play rook d8, getting my last piece in the game. She plays rook f1, and here I play a5, setting up 2 threats. So ask yourself, what are those 2 threats before I tell you? Pause your video if you need. Threat 1 is bishop a6, skewering the queen to the rook. Threat 2 is a4, where I kick the knight, and then I can take on d4 for the same tactic. She plays queen f2, and here I thought for a while because, if I go for a4 right away, I was worried about perhaps bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes, check, king h8, queen takes e7, take here. And sorry, guys. Something like this is apparently a lot better for me. Or if instead I play bishop a6, bishop takes c6, rook takes c6, queen takes f7, king h8, queen takes e7. This is apparently better for black because I can take here and I'm up the exchange. But, I'm a human. This is kind of hard to evaluate. And I just thought I had easier moves. So I decided to play bishop f6 first, just stopping any queen takes f7s. And I don't think e4, e5 is anything to worry about because then your d pawn becomes weak. And here she blunders with a3. Find the winning continuation before I go forward. She should have played a4, stopping here, right? But I play a4. I think she just forgot about this. And knight d2. First, I play bishop a6, getting the bishop off this diagonal and hitting the rook. She plays bishop e2. I take. She takes with the queen. I take on d4 with the knight. She ended up taking with the pawn. Again, if she takes with the knight here, I take the rook, winning the exchange. So she takes the pawn. I take her knight. She takes back. I take with the queen. She plays rook e1. I take on d4 with check. She plays king h1, and I take on b2, and here she resigns, where she's just down way too much material. and her king is weak, and she's in a bunch of pins. For example, I'm attacking this knight twice now. So if you move the knight, I can just trade and mate you. And for example, here, 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 I guess it's not mate, but this is a losing endgame down way too many pawns. And if you play something like rook d1 defending, well, then we put pressure on the pin piece, bishop c3, where the knight is pinned to the queen, the knight is pinned to the rook, and that would be all she wrote. So she resigned here. So I'm going into my last game, and although I was due white, I recently learned that the rule in the USCF chess book, the United States Chess Federation chess book, is when two players are due white, which my opponent Tony, who is the brother of Lubo, is, then the higher rater gets the white, which I don't know, seems a little silly to me because it's like they're the higher rated players. Shouldn't they have the harder path? But I don't know. I guess get your rating up because when one player's due white, or when either player is, you'll get white. And so this isn't my best played game, but I did learn a lot from it. So Tony plays d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Tony's in college, by the way. Younger brother of Lubo. Lubo's my age. Knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6. So I'm playing a King's Indian. Bishop e2, castles, knight f3, e5. One thing to be aware of in the King's Indian is takes, 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 knight takes. Does not win a pawn because of knight takes e4. If you take back, you lose the knight. And if you think you're winning a pawn, if you think you can do another intermezzo hitting the rook, well, then you lose the knight with check and your knight. But Tony plays d5. I play knight d7. Castles, a5, so that when I get to c5, he can't kick me with b4. a3, knight c5, queen c2, and I play bishop d7. I've since reviewed this line, and what I'm supposed to do is play a4 here. White can develop, and then I can play knight b3. The rook can go to d1, and now I play bishop d7. So there's no knight takes a4 tricks because my bishop takes back. And, white can play stuff like knight d2, knight d4, takes, and this is like how the game could go. Something crazy like this. But I played bishop d7, which, usually this bishop is used to sacrifice, so not the move I'm used to. Bishop e3, b6, b4, and what the engine wanted me to do here, pause your video and find it for yourself, is it wanted me to do knight takes e4 exclam. The point being, knight takes, queen takes, f5, queen goes back, and e4, and you attack the knight, you attack the rook. A sample line of how it could go is bishop g5, queen e8, save your rook, and we could have gotten a game like this. I did not see that or even consider that, and so he took back, and yeah, I just have to go back to b7 here. I wasn't really sure. I played a6, and I'm in trouble. He plays queen b3 first. I play knight g4, hitting the bishop. He attacks my queen, f6. The bishop goes back to d2. I play f5, right? I want to expand on the queen side. And then c5 hits the board, and I'm like, oh no, I have made a mistake here because the bishop and the rook attack my knight, which is only defended once. Queen c8 doesn't really do much to help me. Like issues like c6 hits the board. And they're going to just be able to pile up pressure on this knight. My knight can never move because then I lose my rook. And so I have issues here. I'm lost. And so I take on e4. I'm trying to make it complicated. He takes with the knight. I play bishop f5. Again, I'm lost here. I'm trying to make a little razzle dazzle. He plays knight g5. And I take on c5 and take here. So at least I get 2 pawns for the knight. I'm obviously losing here. But maybe, just maybe, I can hold on. knight e6, queen h4, please blunder checkmate. He takes on g4. I take with the queen, plays f3, queen h5, knight g3, queen h4, bishop g5. All his pieces are pushing my queen around. Queen b4. Trading queens is not what you want to do when you're losing, but I literally had no other squares. Takes, takes. Took there, takes my rook, take back. And yeah, we've reached an endgame where bishop for bishop, rook for rook, and I'm just down. I have 2 pawns for the rook. So obviously I'm lost here. But I don't like to resign. I usually like to play on because you never know. Bishop d2, rook b8, rook b1, rook b5, takes, takes, bishop e3, c5, rook b7, rook d3, bishop g5, d5. I'm just trying to make things happen here. Rook a1, I have big issues. Rook a8 is threatening checkmate. h6, rook a8, king h7, bishop f6, pinning my bishop. King g6 takes the bishop. And my notation stopped here, but I tried to get a mating threat and hope he blundered mate again. But of course, that didn't happen, and I lost this game. And so, honestly, like, what most, I wasn't upset I lost this game. I was just more so annoyed, though, that I didn't get a complete game, right? Because I just blundered out of the opening, which is annoying because, I learned a little bit about this opening line, which is nice, I guess, but I didn't really, we didn't get I just got blown off the board here because knight a6 is, and then c5 is just a blunder. And, like, I don't mind losing, but I would prefer to have a battle and learn from it versus just making a silly blunder. So I went 2-2. I lost to Lubo and Tony brothers. Both of them are 2,100, right? Like, that's what should happen on paper. I beat Tanisha. He's 1,600. And I beat Oxford. He's 1,100. So I probably lost a little bit of rating points in this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I got a lot more tournaments coming down the pipeline. Have a great day. Tell your friends about this channel. Appreciate you. Bye.